What marketers get wrong about China. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Trevor Lai in Shanghai. China's consumers have experienced tremendous economic and cultural transformations that shape how they define themselves, their impact on society at large, and how they consume brands. It's hard to keep up with these changes, so this week on Thoughtful China, we're talking with Sandy Thompson, Young & Rubicam's Global Planning Director, about some of the misconceptions companies make about consumers in China. Sandy, thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you.
Based on research from Y&R's Brand Asset Insight tool in your own time dating back to the 1990s in China, you've identified 5 major myths or misconceptions about China. So let's just jump right in. What's one of the major myths?
Well, let me tell you how we got there first. We have a combination of tools. We have something that I love from Y&R, which is BAV. We call it the Brand Asset Valuator. And we've spent the last few years looking at over 1,000 brands in 50 different categories, really understanding what people's relationships are with those brands and how that relationship has changed, not just in the last few years, but 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And then we combine that data with what we call exploring, something very, very true to my heart, which is just getting into the lives of people on an everyday basis, taking them out from behind the one-way viewing mirror and really connecting with them based on what's important to them in the here and now. Once we've taken those two things, there's 5 or 6 different things that start to come out of it, but I'll take you through a few of them. The first one that I found really interesting is that 61% of people today here in China don't want things to change, which means that they're happy, that things are starting to look and feel the way that they love it every single day. 10 years ago, that was 41%, so that's a big shift to think that in 10 years, we've had a 20% shift in how people feel about the here and the now. And as a result of that, we're starting to see how it can affect some of the categories that our clients and the brands that are here in China have with their customers. For instance, the home is becoming much more important. 5-10 years ago, people were happy to go out at night. They're happy to go out and have dinner with friends, and we're starting to see a big shift from going out in the evening to really starting to stay home in the evening and spend more time with your family. And that affects a lot of different brands in terms of how they sell to people, but also how they can get into their home and be part of that confined environment.
But when you look at a number like 61%, how much of that do you factor in, for example, the economic changes, the socioeconomic changes in terms of it's not just perhaps their happiness level and things like that, but for example, in recent years with China's growth actually slowing, eating in might be actually an economic decision rather than, a reflection of their contentment, for example.
Absolutely, but I think they're also finding pleasure in it. If you'd asked them 10, 15 years ago whether they would find pleasure in spending more time at home and less time out, for instance, partying or going to restaurants, they probably would have said no. But with the changes in the economic stature of China, people are now finding pleasure in the things that they maybe didn't find pleasure in 5, 10 years ago. And that's important for us to be aware of and to recognize, to be quite honest. One of the other things that I think is a big change for me, having been here back in the 90s and the early 2000s and then seeing what I'm seeing today, is the whole notion that money earned has a lot more value than money inherited or passed down. There's a real pride in looking at some of the success stories in China and looking at some of the youth in particular who have got a creative spirit to them, who are entrepreneurs and who are making it on their own, regardless of where their family came from. And I think that's a really special thing for us to look at and to take a look at the brands that they're creating and the relationship that those brands can have with the customers as well.
Do you think that there's been a very quick sort of tide shift in from when the accumulation of wealth by any means necessary was first viewed as something that was great and celebrated, but very quickly turned into backlash, and you can see it across all the social media when you see someone showing off now a very expensive watch or purse, etc. They're actually called out. And especially if they haven't earned it and it's been given to them or they've earned it sort of through other means. So do you believe that in China that shift has happened very, very rapidly?
Oh, I think so. I think it has happened. And I think one of the things that we've found from this whole study is that when you accumulate wealth, understanding what you've accumulated and how you spend that wealth has become even more significant than it has been in the past. It's not just about going out and getting the latest gadget or the latest toy or whatever it happens to be, but really being thoughtful about it and knowing that what you're buying is something that you've earned, as opposed to something that you've just accumulated. So yeah, the third one is this appreciation for what you've earned. The fourth one kind of goes along the same lines, which is many years ago when I was working in China, we did a lot with consumers in China, with people across the country in terms of asking them about travel, for instance. It was always about the destination. It was always about, I want to go to Paris, I want to go to Tokyo, or I want to go to New York. Nowadays, how you get there is equally important. It's the whole notion of having an adventure. It's not just about arriving someplace and saying, put the stake in the ground, this is what I've done. It's about what you do when you're there, the experiences that you have, the products that you try, the places that you go. And there's much more depth to it today than there was a few years ago. It goes back to earning something. You earned that vacation, so you're going to make sure that you know and experience absolutely everything that you can along the way.
But when you're comparing those two different sort of responses, are they the same target group? So for example, are they the same middle class or middle upper class that has actually progressed? Because in those last 10 years, it's very likely that their incomes, if they are part of that class, has doubled, perhaps even tripled over that time. So it allows them to evolve from merely wanting to go to a destination to now saying, I've already been there. Now I'd like to experience it, through a culinary tour or things like that. Is that the same target group that you're comparing this with?
No, age is a funny thing these days. It's a frame of mind more so in the world today than it's ever been in the past. But we're definitely seeing it more with the younger generation who want to make sure that they do experience things to the fullest. It's not about having a 5-star holiday, it's about having a great holiday and having a great experience along the way. So the adventure side of it, and you'll see in our report, the adventure side of it's very big. It's about making sure that you experience something to its fullest and that you really come back knowing that you've done that.
Now, I think this is important because our show covers, China in general, which is obviously vast territory, highly diverse. And one of the constant criticisms that's brought up by a lot of experts is when we look at China too much as a unified whole. I'd like to qualify some of your findings and things like that to say, is this really consistent with first-tier Chinese consumers, or are your findings consistent through all the way to second, third, and fourth tier? Well,
the study focused primarily on the first and second tier, so we're looking really at those two tiers and not so much the third, fourth, and further on. So it was where we focused, but it's really where the majority of the money is right now as well. And we're really doing this for our clients who are trying to establish their brands and quite honestly get them out there as part of traditional Chinese culture. The fifth one is probably the most important one, particularly for us as marketers and for our clients here in China. We're seeing a shift from just ownership of brands, just having brands for the sake of having brands, to a lot of these consumers that we've been spending time with really wanting to understand and trust the brands that they have. Trust is a really funny word. It's one of those sort of nebulous words that you don't know really what it means. But the more we dig in and the more we spend time with real people in the real world, we understand that means getting close to the brand. It means being close enough to really understand what it is that makes that brand better. It's having some intelligence around the brand or around the product. And it's having sort of a down-to-earth relationship with it that allows us to make it part of our life as opposed to just something that we accumulate. For marketers, that's huge. When I was in this part of the world, we shouted. That was how we got our brand heard. We made sure we were the loudest. We made sure that we were absolutely 100% over-talking everybody else that was out there. Today, a whisper goes a long way, and getting in close with somebody can actually create that relationship that will sustain the brand for the long term.
Well, number 5 is an interesting point. We've had a lot of luxury brands and experts on our show before, and they talk about the importance of education, especially in the luxury sector. Now in China, with the influx of brands, everything from watches to leather goods, etc., there's a lot of brands fighting for the same high-end consumer, for example. And I believe you're right in the sense that the Chinese consumer has evolved beyond wearing the most expensive watch to wanting to understand how long ago that watch brand was founded, what makes it special, what makes it justify, in their minds, that extreme price. What are some of the brands that you've seen over your time from the 90s till now really prosper and work well to adapt to these types of insights from the Chinese consumer?
That's a good question, actually. It's a tough question. But you see some of the brands, the automotive brands, for instance, have spent the time to really talk about the details that they put into their engineering, the details that they put into the craftsmanship. You certainly see it with quite a few of the clothing brands where it's no longer just go out and buy the $1,000 handbag, but it's really about the stitching that goes into it, the lining that goes into it, and really helping people understand that what they're buying is much more than just a simplified product that happens to cost a lot of money. And the good brands are doing that. They're using different media as well to get that message across. They're doing things on their websites to really give people the story of the brand. They're giving you the luxury of being able to dig in a little bit deeper and really understand what it is that you're buying so that you can not justify it to your friends and family, but you can certainly talk proudly about it. And there's a big difference between justifying a purchase and being able to talk about it in a proud way. And it's something that I think we're going to have to do more of in the future, even as the economy starts to recover. People are going to want to have that kind of relationship, and they're going to want to feel proud of what they've earned and what they've purchased.
So on the flip side of that, what are some of the more glaring mistakes that you've seen brands make?
I think just probably the one that sort of I come across the most is trying to do too much in every single message. You know, they get to a point where they feel they have to justify their product. So they're trying to tell us why we should buy it, how we should buy it, where we should go to buy it, you know, what we should do with it once we own it. And the reality is sometimes less is more in today's market, and being very thoughtful about what you want to say about your product and your brand, and let people establish the relationship that they feel they want to have with it as opposed to what we want to sort of impose upon them. So just taking a step back and giving consumers the opportunity to discover it, and making sure that all of the means are there for them to do that, be it online or in store or on label. It doesn't matter. But don't try to do too much at once. Be very thoughtful, be very clear, and give people the opportunity to discover you as opposed to trying to sell yourself short.
We've had numerous agency leaders on our show talk about the HR and personnel challenges of building an agency in China, and in particular the creative staff and the creative team that every agency really requires as a nucleus. Now, given your experience here in China, talk about some of the evolutions of the Chinese worker as they evolve from to a more creative appreciation, as you've mentioned in your report.
You know, creativity is a really, it's a tough area. I have a son who's a creative person, and it's one of the hardest careers that you can choose. And it's also something that's very hard to express and to sell yourself on when you're looking for a career or for a job. And I think in the case of the talent here, it's about letting loose a little bit. It goes back to that adventure side of it a bit. If we want to increase the creative product in China and make it stronger, make it better, we have to give people the opportunity to take a little time out, to relax their brain a little bit.
The brain off,
yeah,
sort
brain
of,
off,
that
yeah.
you talk about. Yeah.
I like to call it time out, but brain off, absolutely. You're intelligent if you know to sit back and rest for a little bit. That's where real intelligence comes through, because you know that by emptying your head, you can fill it up with new things, and you can make room for new types of communication, new ways of connecting with people. And it's really important that we give our creative talent in this business the opportunity to have some time off and to shut down their brain for a bit.
When you spoke to the consumers for your report, did they spend a lot of time explaining where the impetus for this newfound awareness or this new appreciation really came from? Because in a lot of ways it sounds like they've made an evolution, but as we know, there's always usually a stimulus and at some sort of inflection point. So when you were conducting the research, was there a theme that constantly came up where people said, you know, I saw my parents, or, you know, I saw my coworkers getting burned out, or what was the inflection point for the Chinese worker or the consumers that you talked to?
I think there's a lot of things that was the impetus for it, to be quite honest. I think a lot of it was coming from the pace of change that this country's gone through in the last 10, 15 years. People have been very proud of the fact that China's changing constantly and moving constantly. And I think as a result of that, people are going, okay, enough is enough. I need to take a step back. I need to stop and think for a little bit, and I need to empty my head of a little bit of the information that's coming at me. When you think about just the media that was influencing you 5 or 10 years ago versus what you have in front of you today, it's probably, I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but it's probably doubled or tripled, or even quadrupled in terms of the amount of exposures that we get to messages. People need time to just take a step back and think about things before they dive in and make decisions. And I think a lot of it is just the pace. We've been running at such a fast pace in China that taking some time to slow down is actually a good thing. And it's making people feel much happier in their day-to-day life as a result of it.
So Sandy, let's quickly recap the top 5 findings.
Well, the first one is that people don't want to have change. They're ready for things to slow down and to stay the same for a little while. As a result of that, number 2 is this whole notion that the home has become a bit of a bubble. It's a place that people really do enjoy spending time, and we as marketers need to understand how we can help bring our brands into that environment in a positive way. The third one is a very powerful one. It's the whole notion of earning money is something that you should be very proud of. And how you earn money and what you do with it is something that you can show off and you can flaunt to a certain extent because, frankly, you've gone out there and you've done it. The fourth one I should say, is the adventure. Really understanding that having an adventure today, not just getting to a destination, is quite powerful. And as marketers, we need to understand how to create adventure and experiences around our brands, not just push people for ownership at the end of the day. And then the fifth one, which is probably the most interesting, is the whole notion of getting in close to people. Really letting people take time to know your brand intimately and personally, as opposed to just shouting at them what the benefits are. It is the title of our document, which is really the whole notion of whisper. And if you can whisper to somebody, chances are they'll come much closer to you. And that relationship would be more intimate and hopefully sustained for a longer period of time.
Thanks very much, Sandy.
Thank you.
That wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter and join our LinkedIn group. See you again.